Hey guys, this is Mr. V over here doing a book review today for A New World Begins, The History of the French Revolution by Jeremy D. Popkin. As you can see from the title, this is about the history of the French Revolution. Now I want you to know, before I started this book, I knew basically nothing about the French Revolution. I knew a couple of the names and I knew the main reason. The main reason of the French Revolution was the peasants were very upset with the ruling class and they felt they weren't being treated properly and wanted more say, and that's why they wanted to overthrow the ruling class. And that was all I knew about the French Revolution. So I knew basically nothing. But I would say that this was a great book for someone that knows nothing. Despite it being a one volume, this is a very, very in-depth book. This is a thick book and it also has very tiny print. So that's why this is a very in-depth book. But it was great because despite me knowing basically nothing, he immediately starts the book by giving a brief background on like France and like the previous kings of France, which helps because that leads into the French Revolution. And because even before King Louis XVI, it helps knowing the previous king before him. So to see what was going on before. But for like King Louis XVI, he also shows like his young life before he was the king, you know, what it was like and what was going to happen. And there were some interesting things that he threw in. And then he also showed what it was like for the elite class and what it was like for the peasants. And that's very important because as I told you already, the main reasons were the peasants were angry at the elite class. And you can see why the peasants were so angry. And, you know, it's really great how he shows all that. And he also discusses what Paris was like in the 1700s, because Paris in the 1700s was very different than the Paris we think of today. It was very different. It was not the nice place that we think of today. And it's really good to see that because then again, you can see why the peasants were so angry and why they wanted a revolution. And, you know, I think it's great that he wrote about all that. And then he goes into the complete craziness of the French Revolution. I had no idea. I already told you, I didn't know about the French Revolution, but I had no idea how crazy the French Revolution was. And that's what made this book so fun, was I had no idea how crazy the French Revolution was because they kept changing course during the French Revolution, as there were so many different groups in charge and different people in charge, and they were even executing some of the leaders of groups who started the French Revolution, and they were having like revolutions in the revolution. And it was just so interesting because you don't see that in many revolutions. There's many revolutions throughout history where basically, you know, the person that starts it, one of them, those leaders kind of takes over or does something, but that didn't really happen here. So that's what made it so interesting. And then you can see why it went on for so long. It was from 1789 to 1799. And you can see why it went on for so long. And you just see, and he just covers it very well. And he does it in a very interesting fashion because he describes the toughness during the revolution, the toughness for the leaders, but he also describes the toughness for the everyday people. And I think that is very important because yeah, there was toughness for the leaders as they want to lead, and I told you, different leaders get executed. But you want to see what it was like just for the everyday person. And he does that, and he shows that. And it was just really great because even the everyday person never knew which way to go, never knew who to support type of thing. So that made it very interesting, but he explains it all in the book, and he goes in depth about it. So he goes very in depth, but it was not boring. It was a little tough at times, which I'll talk about in just a bit, but it definitely was not boring. And then he explains how it ended. He talks about the whole revolution, and he explains how it ended. And that's why I would say he covers the whole revolution very well, and very in depth, very interesting, and he covers it well. And I'll give you a slight spoiler right now. Napoleon was the person who was in charge at the end of the revolution. And he gives a quick summary to what Napoleon did after the revolution, after 1799, what Napoleon did. But it is just a very quick summary. So, you know, I just want you to be aware of that. If you're expecting a book about Napoleon, you need to search somewhere else because he only gives about maybe 5 pages to what happened after the French Revolution. 5 pages of what Napoleon did after the French Revolution. Because again, this is the history of the French Revolution. This is not a book about Napoleon. So just be aware of that. Now, some of the things that were a little tough during the book was that there are a lot of town names. There was many small cities. There was a lot of people involved in a lot of French names. And French names are tough for me because they're very long. And they were a little tough for me to remember at times. And he used a lot of French terms, different groups. I told you there was revolutions in the Revolution. And that's why there was different group names, but they were only used during the French Revolution. And that's why it made it a little difficult at times, because there was so many different towns, so many different people, and sometimes with so many different names, it can be a little confusing. You still get the overall picture, but it can be a little tough to follow at times. If you keep reading and you read a few pages further, then I'd be like, oh, okay, I remember who this person is now. But sometimes it was a little tough. And I saw other reviews, I read other reviews, they felt the same. Some people felt the same thing, that sometimes it was a little tough. So, just be prepared for that. But overall, I still think it was not bad. It wasn't hard to follow, because he did a great job writing it. He wrote in a great fashion. It was still pretty easy to follow, and he wrote it in a timeline fashion, which definitely helps. And that's why I said, even when you were a little confused with the names, if you kept reading just a few more pages, then it'd be like, oh, I remember who that is now. And he goes through all the main events, he goes through minor events, and he presents many, many interesting facts in there. Some of that you don't even think about. There's so many that I don't want to say it, but like, I'll give you an example. One of them is, even after the revolution had started, they were still considering keeping the king, whereas most revolutions would want to get rid of the king, where they were still like, oh, we may want to keep the king. And that's very rare for a revolution. So, those are some of the interesting facts he presents, and he shows like why they were considering keeping the king and the discussions they had and all that stuff. And that's why he presents many, many interesting facts that you don't even think about when you hear about revolutions. So I would say that, the author, he covered it very well. And despite this just being one volume, I would say this is a great one volume set for the French Revolution, as this is very in-depth. Again, you can see it's a pretty thick book. It's like 600 something pages, and the print is very tiny. So that's why it still goes very in-depth, despite it only being one volume. So that's why if you want an in-depth version of the French Revolution, I recommend A New World Begins. If you want a lighter version, you may have to get a different book, because this definitely goes in depth. But I definitely recommend, if you want to know the French Revolution and you want to know about the events, I definitely recommend A New World Begins. But if you guys have any comments, questions, please post it in the comment section below. I hope you guys click the subscribe button, as I always upload multiple different types of book reviews. But thank you for watching my book review today. This is Mr. V. Go enjoy reading.